Alright, here we good. Alright, so I'm gonna unblock the traffic and then we'll start formally on 1, 2, 3. I'll try not to run anyone over. That's a new one for you, right? It's like, oh my god, it's like, but hopefully one day you're gonna say, that was this one time on PFL, a crazy Brazilian got me on his car.
Funny. How are you?
Big honor for me today. I'm a big fan. How are you?
Very, very good. Thanks. Yeah.
How we doing with the PFL? I'm very good friends with Eduardo, and I know a lot of backstage. And I tell him, like, PFL, it's one of my favorite events. It's not just because he's a good friend. I like martial arts, so it's like we cannot deny UFC is the largest league, but PFL it's a good second place, far ahead of everyone else in my opinion. And I was so happy that you were there and do your thing now.
Yeah, it's been very, very exciting and fun to be a part of this organization, see them grow as quickly as they've grown, and starting PFL Europe this season,
yep.
Adding and just continuing to develop great talent. Obviously, we're here for the Challenger Series. There'll be 8. This is the second of 8 of those Challenger Series shows,
which is a huge project, right? Like developing fighters, right? Because I think that's no one wants to be that league that brings like retired fighters from the UFC.
Well, I mean,
you got to develop some talent.
Everybody
right?
has a career arc. You're on your way up, or you're cresting over, or you're coming down the backside of your career. That's just how it is. And it's a great time to be in the sport of mixed martial arts right now because there's a lot of places to fight.
That's right.
A lot of opportunities to show your skill sets and go out and be a professional athlete in this society. So, I think that's a huge thing. And the PFL is certainly doing a great job. They created a format that we're all used to. It's the traditional sports format with a regular season.
The tournament too is so exciting.
A playoff and a championship every single year. You get to follow the people you like or you don't like through a whole season and root against them and really get to know them. And I think what's been most impressive has been the fighters embracing the grind, frankly. In the regular season, you're turning around about every 7 or 8 weeks and
that's crazy,
fighting again, but there's a regularity to that. You know when your next fight is, you know who you're fighting and where you're fighting. And most of the fighters don't like waiting for that phone to ring. When's the
that's true too.
Call? When's my next fight? Could be next year. You don't know.
Exactly.
We're all trying to make a living, so.
Exactly. It's that you said something very right on the nail with this. They know they're gonna fight 3, 4, 5 times in 1 year, so that's a good job.
Yeah. Well, you look at like Carlos Leal or Delano Taylor, who came through this Challenger Series.
Yes.
That was at least one, and I think in Leal's situation, he fought 2 other times besides the regular season and the playoffs. It's a lot, but. Man, they take it in stride. They front load their camps. They plan it out. And
just what happened with Mateus last year?
With who?
With Mateus from Brazil, the heavyweights. Like, the opportunity just literally fell on his lap.
Yeah,
like, hey,
he took full advantage of it. He did a great job. He had some great fights. He was fun to watch.
How is this commentary thing for you, because it looks so natural, like you've been doing it all your life?
Well, I did do it for Fox and the UFC for a while, in that stretch where I had retired for a little bit, and I feel like we as fighters see a lot of the subtle nuances in the athletes.
But the communication part of it's a gift now, and not everyone has.
Well, and I think working with Sean and Kenny, I think we have fun. We're having a good time. Yeah. We know the sport. Sean has done an amazing job of immersing himself as a great commentator.
He was the fighter, right? Like he just fought a couple of years ago. He won the
first season. He was literally taking his suit off, putting his board shorts on and going out in the cage and fighting the same night. I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah, yeah. I kept like glimpses here and there. I was like, how's that? And that's crazy.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And he did a great job. Obviously, won the championship that year and then retired, and now has just settled right into being a full-fledged broadcaster. And
I talked to a lot of the great legends. I had Lyoto Machida like a couple of days ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In my studio. And I was like, do you still have that itch to compete on whatever? Like, like, you know, like there's a bunch of grappling, like super matches now. That's like you're like in better shape than some active fighters. So,
I've got to try and stay in shape. Can't roll into a set of the Expendables with a guy like Stallone who's still
exactly right.
7 years old, and ripped and
cranky
in
is
great
also
shape. You're not rolling into that set with Dunlops going, hey, I'm here. You can lint out of your belly button. It's not going to be good.
You can still beat everybody else, but you got to look good, right?
The training process keeps me sane. It keeps me active and keeps me sane. But I would like to be grappling and competing in some of those competitions, but my neck has just taken a beating from years and years of wrestling and then 14 years of fighting, and that was one of the things that led me to eventually retiring from the sport. I could have still kept grinding out camps and competing at a pretty high level, but I didn't want to sustain an injury in the neck that was going to force me to have a surgery or a fusion and then affect the quality of the rest of my life. So I had to make a rational decision and say enough is enough, and it's time to walk away.
It's tough, right?
Yeah, it is.
Especially when you there competing. Like we were just talking about Glover. I'm good friends with
won a championship at a very.
He goes like fights the fight of his life, and next fight he retires. Like it's like wow. He's like, oh, I'm not. And Chael Sonnen said something once that it hit me really real. That was like, it just happens. One night you're there, you say, oh shit, my time comes. And they say maybe that was Glover's moment that night, you know?
Yeah, well, it's such a personal thing. You know, people want to knock fighters for not, for staying too long, for not recognizing when it's time to hang it up.
You stopped right after the Lyoto fight.
I had made the decision in that camp that was going to be my last fight. Win, lose, or draw. Okay. This was the one I'm going out on. It was time. I was 47 years old, going on 48, and
coming out of 3 wins.
In the James Toney fight, every old injury I'd had just flared up in that camp for no real reason. Yeah. And that was the first time in the back of my head, my internal dialogue was like, oh, maybe that's your body telling you it's time to do something else.
Stop, right?
And I think once you've started that dialogue in your head, it's time to be honest and rational and really take a good hard look at what you're doing. And,
I'm having such a moment here right now. It's like I had a few guests that got me really nervous. Vanderlei Silva was one of them. Rickson Gracie was another one.
Oh, okay.
And having you like just look at you right now, I was like, holy shit, it's Randy. Because like I'm an old MMA fan, so like I'm from the gold era, like Randy versus Chuck Liddell, and we'll go crazy with that. That was your biggest rivalry, and
I think it was the first real trilogy in the sport, and certainly, the first fight happened 2 years before The Ultimate Fighter, and obviously the second fight was in the wake of The Ultimate Fighter, the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, which changed the sport and the landscape of the sport for everybody. So obviously the amount of fan base that we had through the course of that reality show. More than doubled for sure. In many ways, that was the end of the golden era of MMA because it changed the landscape so significantly. But at the same time, it was a pretty important moment.
I was just telling Eduardo because like I watched that season. I didn't watch the finals though, but I watched I was watching the whole season. I think it was like on Spike TV or something that, right?
Yeah, Spike was the first one.
Yeah.
willing to put us on regular television, nobody would touch us at that time.
What a crazy time, right?
Yeah.
Like, and look where the sport is right now, on ESPN, and it was on Fox, and
the fastest growing sports in the world right now.
Yeah. I heard in Brazil, I think Combat Channel, they just put a post yesterday that PFL signed with them for this season.
Oh, cool.
I don't think it's like it's gonna happen eventually. I don't know if it's official yet because I didn't see anything from the PFL side. But the UFC part ways with the Combat Channel, which is like the fighting channel in Brazil.
Okay.
So they're going with the UFC Fight Pass there, which was very successful. Then Combat was kind of like hanging and said, oh shit, so they got Bellator, and now they're doing the PFL. So they're going to do really well.
Right.
They're gonna, and Carlos Sapato, Antonio Carlos or Carlos, I don't remember his name. I just know him as a shoe face. The Carlos Sapato. So I think it's Carlos Antonio something. He's on Big Brother Brazil right now.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so cool. he's really famous right now. He had a couple of injuries, so he got invited. He's there right now. He's the most watched television show in Brazil. And people love him. He's such a great guy.
He is a great guy.
He's such a great guy.
Yeah, he's a fantastic competitor too.
Exactly. How do you see this new? I'm saying, and it's almost like a funny thing to say that for you, because you fought heavyweight in great shape, but we always see those big, slow, one-punch heavyweight guys, and I've been noticing, and I say it on the podcast all the time, that this is a trend that's kind of dying. Like you see, like very, very athletic guys, like super, super like shredded and stuff like we have the Capilosa guy and the Renan Ferreira too. Like giant guys, they fucking moving like a middleweight guy. It's crazy.
Delia, obviously, who won last year.
Exactly.
Sheffel's another one. Yeah, there's the
super agile
that started a while ago in mixed martial arts. They weren't just big guys anymore. They're big guys that are athletic, that have skill sets and can move, and it absolutely changed. I think you saw guys like, well, certainly Lesnar comes to mind, but Rico Rodriguez and some of these guys that that weren't just great big guys.
You fought Brock Lesnar. How freaking strong was he?
He's a big guy, very big athletic man for sure.
That was crazy. I think that was the biggest WWE slap we got, right? Because like those guys can fight, then comes Brock Lesnar.
Brock has a real wrestling background. He was an NCAA champion for Minnesota. He's a legit athlete.
Yeah.
Very,
I mean, those guys are legit. They get super mad at me. I'm not gonna get into this. They're great athletes.
Absolutely.
We'll leave it like that. But and so
sports entertainment.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great word. I'm gonna start using that because people hate me when I talk about it. So what should we expect for this season? Is there anyone that we should keep an eye on, like a maybe a Brazilian talent? We just saw Hulk from Jiu-Jitsu lost last week on a Challenger Series. That was a big letdown for us.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, the Challenger Series is the Wild Wild West. So many of these athletes are very talented, but we haven't seen them much. We don't know that much about them, and that's what's really intriguing and interesting. Now, what do we have? 7 or 8 countries represented in this show tonight. So they're pulling talent from all over. We got a gal from Mongolia, which we've never had an athlete.
That's crazy.
From Mongolia.
Yeah. That's so cool.
What do we have? 22 countries represented in last year's season. So it's definitely a world organization. They're pulling from talent pools all over the place, and I think that's important. And it's just, it certainly signifies how much globally this sport has exploded.
Yeah, I have. There's an actual good friend of mine coming next week. It's Danilo Marques. He fought in the UFC and he made a move to the heavyweight division. He's like, I don't know, it's like 7 foot tall or something like this.
Oh wow!
He's a giant guy. Has some good boxing background.
Like Stefan Struve.
Damian.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Very tall,
exactly.
Dutch
He's
guy.
He's a little. He's not as tall as Stefan Struve, but he's there, and he's in that heavyweight pool that I was talking about, like super athletic guys, like they move fast, and it's just super excited to see it. Right?
Francis Nagano's a free agent right now. I mean, there's a fair chance that the PFO could pick him up and add him to the heavyweight division. That'd be amazing. It'd be great.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
I'd love to see him and Ante D'Elia, hook it up in a pay-per-view for the pay-per-view models. Our current heavyweight champ and Francis. That would be a great fight.
Because people, I love, like, I hear a lot of fan talk because I'm much closer to the fans than fighters and events and stuff like that. But and people are like, oh, this guy, if that guy goes to the UFC, he's gonna get beat. Oh, that guy, and people just don't understand. For like a D'Elia guy, he's making great money at PFL. He's competing in high level. He doesn't want to go to the UFC. He's happy where he is, right?
Yeah.
And then you put a fight like that. It's a public surprise because the not like all the public has his eye on him, and then he goes there and make a great fight, maybe even wins. Like Francis doesn't have a great wrestling background. Dante, it's like the size of a wardrobe.
Yeah.
And it's and people just get shocked. You see like Marlon Moraes last year. I'm good friends with Marlon. I was devastated, but you say, look, it's reality.
Yeah.
It's a top level fighter that comes to a different league, and it gets outperformed because there's talent everywhere now. That's what you were saying earlier, right?
There's a fighter standing on every street corner that wants a shot and is willing to do what he needs to do to get there.
Exactly. Crazy stuff. What is going back to those Chuck Liddell years and the years that you were the champion competing? What was like a crazy funny story that not a lot of people? I was gonna say no one knows, but if no one knows, there's a good reason for that. So maybe something that not a lot of people know.
Oh man, those were interesting days for sure. I cornered Dan Henderson, who's one of my best friends, for a lot of his Pride fights, and I remember being there. Dan had made a bunch of T-shirts that he wanted to sell over in Japan at the Satayama Super Arena, which is a huge arena. I can't remember if he was fighting Vandalay that show or who he was fighting, but he made all these T-shirts. He was trying to negotiate a deal with Pride.
Okay.
And to get a booth on the mezzanine with everybody else.
Okay, like a little store thing.
They're like, okay, yeah, we'll do that for you, but we're going to take 60% of what. I'm like, I made these shirts, I brought these over here, and you want to take 60% for me to have a booth? So he's like, nah, the hell with that. So we took the duffel bags out to the mezzanine, where outside the arena where the subways dump off for the arena, and I started signing autographs on shirts, and a couple of our buddies started selling shirts right there on the sidewalk outside of the arena. Man, we got mobbed. I was sure we were going to get crushed. I mean, they started fighting to get in front to take pictures and other stuff, and they backed us up to a wall, and I could see people for as far as I could see it. I was like, I started to freak out. I'm like, man, we're going to have to fight our way out of here. So we had to start stuffing T-shirts in the bag and get the hell out of there because they were going to crush us. The
fans there were crazy. Like Vanderlei said, Vanderlei couldn't go anywhere.
Oh no, man!
He was like a big star. And I had Shogun, who just retired as well. And but I talked to a bunch of the Renzo Gracie. I'm a Renzo Gracie guy, so I talked to a guy who was with Renzo's brother Ryan there at the time, and they were saying like, because those guys are not fighting, and they're just looking from behind, and they was like, it was crazy, like crazy.
Insanity.
If you think you're seeing like fans in Vegas for fights and stuff. When Conor McGregor fights, that they invaded casinos and stuff.
Yeah.
So he was kind of like that, but much more well behaved because the Japanese, like, right?
Yeah.
But they are fans. Like they don't scream and break shit. But
about being in those arenas in the Japanese crowd, you can hear a pin drop.
Yes,
so quiet.
they watching.
They clap,
right?
And they're not. It's a completely different thing compared to the Brazilian or the American market. I'm good. I had my coffee already this morning. If I have two, I start to hover.
Okay. So I put a little thing on Instagram for some people to. I got a little upset. I put something like, "Hey, send some. I was gonna do something like with your picture, and say send some questions to the legend. If you don't know who that is, you shouldn't be following this page." Then I was like, all right, I'll be nice. So look. David is saying, how would you deal with the crowd? Like, let's say you're fighting Machida in Rio or something like that. What was the worst crowd adversity you ever fought, and how would you deal with that?
Probably the craziest crowd I've experienced, and in this particular show, I was in the UK. I was going over there as a commentator. Gonzaga and Krokop were fighting, and even when I fought there in Manchester against Brendan Vera, the crowd there was very, very aggressive. And I remember when I fought Vera, walking into the arena, to go to the cage to fight, my hat got stripped off my head by the crowd.
Wow.
So now I had to do my post-fight interview. That was a sponsored hat. So one of my corner guys has to give me his hat so I could do the interview with my sponsor on there.
Wow.
That hat got stolen walking out of the arena. That Krokop fight.
Can I have a large iced coffee, no sugar and extra cream? This is a thing we do. We always stop for a coffee. Yeah, that's going to be all.
All right, cool.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
My girlfriend's from Massachusetts.
Dunkin' Donuts, right? Yeah.
I'm from Seattle, so I'm more of a Starbucks guy, but we have this debate all the time.
Coffee I like the best, believe it or not, it's the McDonald's coffee.
Oh, yeah?
They have good coffee. There's a brand they use it. I don't know what it is.
I haven't been in a McDonald's since 1999.
No shit, right?
And that was in Tokyo because they make pancakes. It's pretty tough to screw up a pancake.
Yeah, no shit, right? No shit. It's so funny. So you lost your. Did you see the Rio UFC Rio that they were throwing shit at Moreno's?
Yeah.
They have a different rivalry.
Danny's first fight, Hendo's first fight was in Brazil too, and I can't remember the Brazilian that he fought, but he won, and the crowd kind of went crazy and tried to storm the cage and get in the cage. And Dan was a little freaked out. He was like, "Man, am I going to have to fight all these?"
And he would.
Yeah.
And he would.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. That crowd at the Gonzaga Krokop fight was pretty out of control. And I'm wearing a suit and tie because I was commentating, and they're grabbing my suit and trying to rip my clothes right off my body. I was like, man, but slug my way out of this place too.
Right? And Hiki Hoyak, it's asking, how close were you really to fight Fedor? And he was like, sending you.
Obviously, I was holding Dana and the UFC's feet to the fire because that's the fight I wanted. Most of the rankings had me ranked number 2 in the world and him ranked number 1 in the world, and so obviously that's the guy you want to fight if you want to be the best fighter in the world. You got to fight the best guy. So I tried with the UFC to get that fight to happen. They got into a solid negotiation with Fedor and M1 Global because that's who handled Fedor. They came to an agreement on money, but they couldn't come to an agreement on some other terms like a co-promotion. The only way M1 would do that is if UFC would do a co-promotion. M1 and UFC present that fight.
Yeah.
And the UFC said, no way, we're not putting you over. We're not going to do a co-promotion. That's not going to happen.
Because they're going to end
so
up
the whole thing fell apart.
Right?
So then that's when I left the company to try and pursue that fight and make that fight happen. Mark Cuban was helping me. The UFC was filing injunctions and trying to keep me from going anywhere else, even though my interpretation of the language of my contract would have allowed me to go fight him somewhere else. So that was the question. At some point, you know, they were legally going to try and force me to spend a bunch of money and drag it out as long as they could to keep that from happening. And I'm, 43 going on 44 years old.
Yeah.
You know, the clock's ticking. I don't have time to mess around and wait and try and make this fight happen. So I came back, ended up fighting Brock, and finished out my career, which honestly was one of the best contracts I had.